How's it going, neighbors? I'm Anarchy in the 603, and this is another postcard from your friendly neighborhood anarchist. Nobody's favorite quality free content, haphazardly dispatched from wherever I happen to be at the time. Today, being brought to you from the messy environs of my basement studio. Today's topic comes to you via my community tab. Shout out to my subscribers, and thank you guys for sticking around for my audio visual equivalent of bathroom graffiti. Feel free to shoot me a comment down there and let me know you came by, but for now, let's begin. This one's going to be a hard one for me because while I love New Hampshire to the point where it's a running joke among my friends and family that I'm basically an unpaid arm of the New Hampshire Tourist Board, I'm gonna have to be blunt. Growing up here back in the 80s and 90s was, by and large, an extremely isolating experience. At the time, New Hampshire was even less diverse than it is today, to the point where, for the longest time, there was only myself and one other biracial student in the entire K-12 school system. Together, we made one entire minority, and we weren't even of the same ethnicity. My mom's side of the family is Filipina, my folks having met back when my dad was stationed there during the Vietnam War, and my Lolo and Lola, my maternal grandparents, came to live with us when I was 8 until after I graduated high school. New Hampshire's a small state, and even now we only have a little over 1.5 million citizens, and the Filipino community, no matter where you go, is pretty tight-knit, if you can find us in the first place. My grandparents were among some of the few elders of the community in the area, and my Lola was among hihilot, a traditional Filipina healer of some renown back in her home village. As a result, not only did my grandparents become sort of the surrogate parents of my mother's generation of the local diaspora, but my Lola had a continual string of clients who would come to her for aid in healing all sorts of maladies, aches, and pains, and my parents' house was always full to bursting with people and food around every major holiday and event. Despite all of that, though, there was always a distinct barrier between myself and the other American-born kids and our parents, like a line between us at these celebrations that kept us from being fully of these celebrations, and it wasn't there between the kids who were born back in PI and the rest of those adults. And I think that's something that's common to a lot of us kids that are born of the first generation to come to the country. No matter how much of the language we retain, the food that we love, or the songs that we know, we just lack a certain innate Filipino-ness. And back then, it always set us distinctly in the category of other. And for me, that othering, unintentional as it often was, it hurt in ways that I've never really tried to articulate in words before now. One of my earliest memories as a child was of singing along to my mother's albums of old Filipino love songs while I sat on the kitchen island counter watching her make lumpia wrappers by hand. Tagalog was my first language. It was pretty much all I spoke at home until I started going to school, and it wasn't until I started getting bullied for being different around the 4th grade that I started to cultivate my fake white person accent. I'd always been raised to be proud of my Filipino heritage and was raised in a household that was very culturally Filipino. My mother was definitely the one who ruled the roost in the house, to the point where she would often curtly remind me when criticizing something she found to be either pointless, distasteful, or ridiculous about American culture. Remember, you're Filipino. To warn me away from emulating or imitating whatever it was that she was criticizing at the time. And yet, at the same time, she and the other adults in the community would often say of us kids dismissively, "Oh, those kids. They're too American. They don't understand. They were born here." As a result, myself and the other American-born kids would usually awkwardly group together at the big community gatherings, sort of an all-Filipino-American breakfast club cast of kids who would usually never meet or mix in daily life and have virtually nothing in common, but who would be thrown together at every holiday and birthday party to make stilted conversation while waiting for their turn at the SNES controller. There's not a lot I can say about my dad's side of the family, I hate to say. I mean, my father's side of the family weren't exactly what I would call close, and though my father was tight with a couple of his 6 siblings, the ones he was closest to in heart were also the ones that lived farthest away geographically, so I didn't get to know most of my dad's side of the family very well. My dad was very close with his father, who passed away when I was about 14 years old. And I have very fond memories of him, as well as my grandmother, who unfortunately succumbed to dementia not long after Grandpa died and passed away after several years in a nursing home when I was in my early 20s. I honestly have to give my grandparents a lot of credit. My dad married my mother not too many years after it had become legal for their races to intermarry. And from what I hear, it took them a while to accept her, but by the time I came along, as far as I could see, they didn't treat her with any prejudice. And it was always clear to me that my grandparents on my dad's side loved me very much, although they were always somewhat awkward with their affection. But how much of that can be attributed to them being products of having survived both the Great Depression and World War II, I can't be sure. School. Now that was rough. I mean, kids can be the worst, let's be real. And while 1980s and 90s bullying didn't have the relentlessness and pervasiveness of modern day bullying with the social media and group text aspects, it was still pretty brutal. And kids will always pick on your most obvious differences. So I got a lot of the old classic schoolyard anti-Asian taunts, which were for some reason always about Chinese and Japanese people and never anyone of my own actual ethnicity. Like, come on. That is some wicked lazy racism right there. I could at least acknowledge if they put in some effort to come up with some new racist rhyming chants about me and my people and give them some sort of gold star for that, but they couldn't even be bothered to come up with something new? Appalling. Okay, now this part's not in the script, but I will never forget. One time I was walking down the stairs between classes in middle school. Like, class was going on, but I had to go to the nurse's office or something. I'm walking down the stairs, and there's this kid who's a couple of grades above me, standing at the bottom of the stairs, and he looks up at me and he goes, "Hey, so, are you a..." insert slur for Hispanic person here. And I said, "No." And then he goes, "So, are you a..." insert slur for Chinese person here. And I said, "No." And then he's like, "Okay, so are you a..." insert slur for Japanese person here. And I said, "No." Guess again. And I kept walking, and he's just standing there like, you could see the gears turning, and he's all like blank brained, like he had just exhausted all three of the racist options that he could come up with for someone of my color. And then he just sort of error 404'd right there, like completely unable to come up with anything else. It was actually kind of funny at the end of the day. But let's back to it. For real though, it was painful for me that just because I was different, I was somehow inherently bad. My food was weird, my house smelled different, my grandparents spoke a different language, and all of that set me apart from everyone else in a way that made me feel alien in my own land. There's a saying I've heard through videos about the LDS Church, the Mormons. I guess they have a saying amongst them that they're in the world, but not of it. The first time I ever heard that sentence, it resonated with me in an odd sort of way, because that's kind of the way I've always felt, as though there was a pane of glass between me and everyone around me, or like a biologist in a blind, surreptitiously taking notes on my observations, quiet and unseen. And as time went on, I made use of those notes, and I used them well. For example, by the time that I made it to high school, I had perfected my fake white person accent to the point where I've got folks in my life that I've known since my late teens who didn't hear my real accent for over 20 years and were shocked to hear what I really sounded like under the carefully applied veneer of assimilation that I had layered over myself like so much enamel. And you see, just like that. It's a subtle switch, but all of a sudden, accent erased. But honestly, I think that's part of why I went so hard into assimilating and blending for so long. It was because it was so homogenous here. Like, not only were the dominant beauty standards of the 80s and 90s almost entirely Western European, but I just looked it up, and even as recently as 2023, there were only about 52.5 thousand people on the census who checked the category of Asian/Pacific Islander. How many of us does that equal in terms of Filipino? I wasn't able to find out from a quick Google search, but I can't imagine that it's more than 1,000 or two at most. And that's out of a population of 1.5 million people in the state total. And honestly, I don't think that the pressure to blend in was even all that limited to the kids of my generation. I remember for a while there, while I was in the 7th or 8th grade, every weekend it seemed that my home was suffused with the smell of home permanent solution as a seemingly endless string of my ates went under the plastic cape and suffered the tight curlers and smelly white substance that was promised to give them the light body wave that they wanted. Those bountiful, feathery waves of hair like that on Cindy Crawford or Brooke Shields or Farrah Fawcett of the generations before. And every single one of them would come out from under those curlers with their gorgeous, thick Asian tresses tortuously twisted into tight poodle-like curls. The only kind that will take on hair so thick and straight. And each of them would convince themselves in the mirror that it would soften up eventually. Spoiler alert, the curls did not soften up eventually. And I can say this from personal experience because at some point in late middle school, even I fell under the cursed concoction of the perm solution after months of my mother pushing me and convincing me to do it. And in my parents' house somewhere are the regrettable school photos that came of it as a result. And no, there's no way in hell I'll ever reveal those on camera. My standards for my appearance on cam are low, but I've got to draw the line somewhere, and awkward middle school me is, I suppose, where I'm drawing it. And I guess that's where I'll end it. Things have gotten a bit less homogenous here over the decades. My son is 23 now, but I recall being delighted by the amount of brown faces I saw amongst all the kids in the choir when we would attend his middle school recitals. And in fact, one of the largest Indonesian populations north of NYC happens to be in the tiny New Hampshire city of Somersworth, and they've even got a little Indonesian cultural center there, and have really embraced their multicultural identity. In the years since 2020, we've had a couple of submarines that docked in the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, which brought a couple of hundred sailors and their families from all over the country to live in New Hampshire's seacoast temporarily for a couple of years while their ships get refitted for duty. Inevitably, a few people from away are going to fall in love with the way of life here and stay, and hopefully there'll be a few more families of color living here as a result. New Hampshire is geographically isolated, slow to change, and has a reputation for folks who are kind of hard to pin down but have an independent streak a mile wide. I know that everything I said above may have given the impression that my upbringing was one of racist isolation, but there's a reason why I still live here after all of these years. Yes, there were some awful, closed-minded people that I've encountered during my upbringing. Yes, I've had to code switch. And only recently has the area gotten diverse enough for me to feel comfortable decolonizing my speech patterns and using my natural accent. But overall, the people here are solid people who, once they get to know folks a bit, embrace the differences and the cultures of the folks that have made their New Hampshire their home, despite having been born on the other side of the world. We've always been known for our state motto, live free or die. And if you come here on vacation, you'll see that slogan on bumper stickers and t-shirts and tattoos everywhere you go. And we not only wear it on our shirts, on our cars, and even in our skin, we truly live by that saying. I've traveled all over the U.S., and truly, like Dorothy says, there really is no place like home. There's something about the mindset here that just embraces the people from away who love this place as much as the native Granite Staters do, despite the folks on the local New Hampshire subreddit who are constantly going on and on about how people from out of state are ruining the local culture. I mean, we've also got one of the states with the highest population of retirees, and, well, I'll let you draw your own conclusions from there. Anyway, if you have made it this far, thank you for sticking around to listen to an old crone talk to herself under terrible lighting in her messy basement studio. To my handful of subscribers, thank you for your support and for hanging out with me as I talk about whatever comes bubbling to the surface of my brain. And to the new folks, feel free to subscribe for more sporadically published, quality-free content from nobody's favorite friendly neighborhood anarchist. Like Jerry Springer used to say, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And so until next time, this is Anarchy in the 603, heading out.